wise person once told me back in the day, don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. You can come from, I don't care where you came from, how you grew up, all those types of things. But one thing I've noticed across the board, the best SDRs out there have certain characteristics. Okay. And that's curiosity, that's passion, and last and most importantly is coachability.
Tech family, what's up? It is Justin here with Tech Journey. I am here with Keith Laughner, a director in sales for the tech industry. So obviously we are in for a treat. So lock in until the end of the video. And of course, I will be posting his LinkedIn in the description for you to connect with him going forward. So with no further ado, Keith, what is up, my friend?
Not much. Thanks for having me, Justin. It's a pleasure.
Oh, man. So, Keith, so we gonna jump straight into just explain to us, what is your role in tech? And then after that, we're going to double back to more of a personal side of you.
Yeah, for sure. So for about the last 7 years or so, I've been working in sales development. I've been building teams all across the gamut. I run the whole gamut, right? Like from employee 0 all the way out, scaled out globally. I've inherited some teams. So I've been doing that for the last 7 years or so. And I recently just rejoined a company that I had started with years back called Invoca. And so now I'm, like you said, I'm director of sales development there. My main focus is the mid-market enterprise new logo acquisition. And so, yeah, that's what I'm doing now. It's been really exciting. It feels like going back home. That's a great culture over there. So.
Come on. So Keith, so all right. So that is like obviously extremely high ranking to me, right? I'm a sales development representative. So like you, when you first started off in tech, did you start off in sales first?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So my very first role in sales was a door knocking job. It was selling IT managed services. And so that taught me how to objection handle quite a bit. But then I transitioned to selling mobile ads. And then just kind of worked my way up, got into Invoca, and yeah, I actually joined there as an SDR and moved through the ranks, team lead, manager, all that kind of stuff, all the way up to director where I'm at now. And so it's been quite a journey.
Nice. Now, Keith, so I'm just curious. So when you started off as a sales development rep in tech, did you have the type of mindset or the understanding that you would one day be at this point?
Yeah, not doing what I'm doing today. I kind of run by the mantra of like, figure out what you love and go get paid for it. And so I kind of fell into that because I love to teach and coach and do all those types of things. But when I first started out, I was on the AE individual contributor path the whole way. I thought that's just was naturally what you're supposed to do. And then over time, I got into like a team lead role and I started doing coaching on like talk tracks and playbooks and just process and stuff like that. And I could tell people were starting to kind of like really dig it a little bit, and my boss at the time had come up to me and he was like, "Hey Keith, had you ever thought about managing?" And I was like, thinking in my head, I was like, not really. But then the one thing I was doing in my life that just gave me pure joy that I was literally doing for free was teaching my daughter or coaching my daughter's softball team.
Nice.
And so like I started thinking about it and I was like, wait a second, these guys are about to pay you money to teach and coach. Yeah, maybe it's not on the dirt, but it's still teaching and coaching. That's what you love to do. Like, do it, man. Like, what are you even considering? Like, go for it. And so, yeah, I fell into it, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So like, have you always had that kind of heart for people, Keith? Like even like as a child, teenager? I mean, were you more of like a people's person?
No, and that's funny. I love people in general. I do. But I'm an introvert at heart. And so like being like a leader in tech, that was not really like, I'm a pretty passionate, like intense kind of guy, like in a good way, but I'm a quiet, I'm naturally just quiet. I'm like a silent observer. And so actually, it's really helped push me outside of my comfort zone and stuff. And now it's like natural state, but even at the end of the day, I still like to go into my little hole and just get some peace and quiet. But yeah, it wasn't my default setting. And so it's been actually really cool, just not only professionally, but just like learning new personal skills too, just being able to like manage people and all that kind of stuff.
So that's interesting that you say you're naturally an introvert.
It's hard.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know, like, I guess like what persona I have of like a sales director, right? But even like when you first like jumped on this video and we first met, like your personality was just so humble. I guess if I had to describe it. And I remember like paying attention to your demeanor, and I'm like, well, his demeanor is like super cool and like laid back. Like he seems like a pretty down to earth person to be like a director of sales. He's not like super intense or anything.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I definitely can see how you being in a leadership role would definitely, I can see how it would be good for someone to be under your care.
It's fun, and I appreciate you saying that. And I do. I try to be laid back and all that. That's normally, I'm not like a yeller or just like do this, do that type of thing. But like I said, I mean, there's lines in the sand. Like, accountability is really big to me and things like that. And so, you know, I think it's a good balance. Like I think people have described me, people who have worked with me, as strict, but not too strict, like more of like the dad of the group, like something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I try to be cool, calm, collected. Like I said, I love to teach, and as long as people are meeting me halfway, we're gonna have a really good relationship for sure.
No, that's good, Keith. So Keith, I got a question right before we segue into just asking you, like, what do you like to do in your downtime when you're not working? In terms of time you put in to your job, from the time you started off early on in tech sales to doing what you do now from a directing standpoint, do you put more time into the job, whether it's on the clock or off the clock now, or did you put more into the job when you first started as an SDR?
That's a great question, actually. And so it's a little bit hard to answer because now, well, like when I first started, I was just so confused all the time. Right. And so like it felt like a job. I didn't know which way it was up. And so like I was putting in a lot of like unnecessary time back then.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Until I had to start to figure it out. But as my career started to progress, I still put in a lot of time, but it's time that I want to put in because I love what I do. Like it's not hard for me to sit there and work on like a playbook or some sort of training framework or just reading new material or learning something new. I like hours can go by and I won't even know it. And so
Wow.
like I don't know if I can quantify which one was
Yeah.
more, but
Yeah.
now it's more quality time. Like it's doing things that I really enjoy because the things that I didn't know back then aren't at play anymore. And so I don't feel, I mean, I'm always confused. If you've ever been in tech, there's things coming all the time, but like there's a certain level of I don't know if it's productivity, but that I've gotten to where my default is like, okay, I kind of know what's going on. So now I can like think of like, how can I get better type stuff as opposed to
Ooh.
like learn my job.
So, so I want to go back to that. I'm gonna ask you this question though. What do you do in your spare time, or what do you do in the time that you're not actually working or thinking about work? What do you like to do?
I mean, first and foremost, I love spending time with my family, like my little girl, my 20-year-old too. She's down in San Diego now, so we don't get to see her all the time. But yeah, I love hanging out with my family. Um, I call myself a golfer, but I pretty much I retire from golf pretty much every weekend that I go. So then I'll pick it back up on Monday. But yeah, I love to golf. I do a bunch of CrossFit, like spend time with my family. Like, I was an athlete growing up and stuff. And, I was in the Marine Corps. So I need that kind of like, I need to be able to compete physically, and CrossFit, that checks that box for me. I love it. I know people like to say it's like a cult, and that's totally true, but it's a good thing. Yeah,
Right,
golf, working out, spending time with my family. I love to read, like all that stuff.
right. No, that's cool. That's really cool, and that's something that I appreciate from just entering into the tech field, being able to work remote, being able to make a good amount of income from the time that I spend at work, right? And then to be able to allot the time outside of that to my family, right? To things to improve, to get better. Yeah, and that leads me to, you said something about, you know, always being in a place where like you're learning, where you're growing. And when I was talking with Eric in our last interview, we kind of touched on that. And that's something that I've been really big on in this recent season of my life, Keith.
Yeah.
Like really, really big on, even if I'm doing well at something, it still comes in my mind, okay, I'm doing well, but how can I get to next level now?
That's
You're
right.
right. It's like what's next? What's next? Like, where did that mindset come from? Is that something that you feel has just kind of always been with you, or did it begin when you entered into a certain career?
No, yeah, that's always been, man. I like, if you would have met 20-year-old Keith, my competitive nature, I won't, I love to compete against people, but man, my internal competition is insane. So like, I have to always be getting better. If I don't feel like I'm getting better, I just get weird, right? Like,
Oh,
and so that's a really important thing. That's how I'm wired. I love self-development. I love learning new stuff. That fills my bucket. Like it's funny, like if I go too long without reading a book or just learning something new, like I can feel it. It's really weird.
wow.
Like I just know something's off. And it's usually because I didn't read a book or I'm not learning something new and all those types of things. So for me, that's just built in. I think, you know, if you can find, if it's not built into you, but you can find a way to learn how to self-develop and put your success in your own hands, the sky's the limit, man. It's so important.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just it means a lot. And I guess for me, like historically speaking, I guess I hit a point in my life where I just became content with I don't know, just content with not knowing what I didn't know, right? Just kind of focus on what I'm focusing on. And, you know, if something was like so big, like starting a business, I wouldn't really give a whole lot of thought to it because, oh, I don't know how to do that. So I'm just going to focus on this. Not ever, I guess, just stopping to think like, well, dude, just like go learn how to do it. Like go watch a YouTube video, go read a book. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just sit down and figure it out until you learn it. So no, that's super cool. All
And
right. So no, what you got? Go.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, believe me, there's been times in my life where comfortable was the best thing, right? Like, it's just like, I'm good. Like, because everyone has that imposter syndrome. So like thinking about like, even you starting this podcast, like that's a big deal. Like you should feel good about that, right? It's not easy to just be like, I think I'm just going to go start a podcast and put the work in on that. Like that sounds exhausting, right? But when you do it, it feels good. And when you can find that feeling of getting better and progressing just yourself personally or professionally, that starts to become addicting. And then all of a sudden, you're just doing cool stuff all the time because that's what you thrive on. And but you have to learn that. You have to take the first leap.
Yeah.
Once you take the first leap, it's becomes second nature. But as a default, I think most people, they like to hide and be comfortable, right? Like you don't want to be out there standing out and trying new things. And fear of failure, that'll get you too. You can't be scared to fail because you're gonna a lot,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow. So that leads into a really good thing to talk about, code calling.
Oh yeah.
That leads into something good to talk about, Keith, because I know just from us chatting back and forth on LinkedIn, that is one of your superpowers is
Oh
code calling,
yeah.
right? And so when I was first entering into the whole tech field, a guy who made cold calling look cool to me, a guy named Trent Dressel, and we actually had the opportunity of having him on the show. And since I've been working in tech, I've made a lot of calls so far. And in an odd way, it almost becomes like a thrill of just shutting my mind off from hindrances or excuses or the last rejection and just like going at it like they just can't wait to pick up the phone and talk to me.
Yeah.
So I would be curious to just know from you and just hear you elaborate on that more. But first, I want to start off. This is an interesting question. What exactly is cold calling? Now, what I'm asking is because I'm new to tech, right? The people I call are people who already have a product in my company, and we're just seeing if they can optimize themselves by going with a different plan. So I don't personally really know, like, is a cold call someone that has never heard of your company or just never heard of you? What exactly is it?
Yeah. And so right now in tech, I mean, there's all kinds of tools and processes and different tactics out there to warm up your calls. Like straight up cold calling to a certain extent has gone away. But because we're talking about cold calling, that's exactly right. Like you're calling in on somebody who legitimately has never heard of you or or your product or service and has literally no interest. And so it's basically like you walking up to someone's door, kicking it in and introducing yourself. That's exactly what it is. And so it's
Understood.
not for everybody. Not everybody's like, I think I want to do that right now. This sounds like a hoot. So, but yeah.
Understood. Understood. So to the viewers who's watching, who I'm sure a lot of them are obviously going to be either be in tech sales or entering into the tech sales space. Is cold calling really that scary, Keith? Like,
No,
elaborate on that.
no, it's not. I mean, like I appreciate and acknowledge the butterflies you get in your stomach when you pick up that phone and you hear it start getting picked up. But it's just like warming up for a workout or a game or something like that. Once you get a couple reps in, it's actually super fun. And if you're competitive enough and you care and you can learn through failure, because it literally is a failure sport. It's super rejection dense. If you hit 3 out of 10, you're making the Hall of Fame type thing. But for me, we just talked about learning. If you have the right perspective and you're jotting down all the different objections that you get or all the things that you said that worked, all the things that didn't, and then you're writing out your responses to those routine things, because 90% of what happens on a cold call happens every single time. And so don't make it more than what it is. Like practice those common objections and like go out there, try it. If it doesn't work, okay, what could I have done differently? And once you learn to fall in love with that process, it's the funnest game in the world. It is so fun. There's nothing better than setting a meeting over the phone straight up cold, like where the person was like, I'm not interested. And the next thing they know, they're putting time on the calendar. Like that is odd. That to me is so fun. That's why I chose a career in it. Cause like I said, you know, I wanted to go be an AE, but when I was thinking about it, it was like, I don't know, man. This is what I love to do. Like this is a fun thing. If you can learn how to do this, the rest of your sales career is going to be fine.
Wow. Touch on that a little more. So you're saying like the difference between the side that you're on as opposed to AE, meaning an AE doesn't really make as many like cold calls. They're closing more.
Yeah, I mean that's why sales development is a thing. Is because what someone at some point realized was that if you are in charge of the full cycle, meaning like sourcing your own pipeline, closing your own deals, managing your own accounts, like that's just too much. That's too many hats. And so that's why specialization is there. And so there are different skill sets that you need to learn to take a deal to close. But at the end of the day, being an SDR, it's kind of the same thing. I would actually argue it's harder because you have to open a deal and close a deal in like a minute and 30 seconds. Right. And like AE, same deal. But now you're talking to people who are already teed up, who are a lot warmer, who want to talk to you. Now it's your job to get them through the funnel. And so all it really is being an AE is just a few more calls, like having to jump through a few more hoops with like procurement and legal and all those types of things. But usually other people are doing those things. Like once the contract's out, like legal's involved now, and you're kind of sitting back taking the next one. And so it's basically like closing a deal in a minute 30. So it's like it's a sales cycle in a minute 30, except you had to start with a cold prospect, and that's pretty cool.
No, that's true. That's really good perspective. And yeah, I have been growing to appreciate SDR work more. I've appreciated it. So Keith, in your years of experience, as we're talking about cold calls and we're talking about this type of tenacity that you have to have, or really just the ability to take notes, figure out how to overcome, improve, optimize, and get better. What types of personalities or people from what backgrounds have you seen excel the most, like coming in as an SDR and going through the tech sales process?
Yeah, the cool thing about sales is that we just talked about I'm an introvert. So like as far as like personalities and things like that, you can be all over the place. You can come from, I don't care where you came from, how you grew up, all those types of things. But one thing I've noticed across the board, the best SDRs out there have certain characteristics. And
Okay.
that's curiosity, that's passion, and last and most importantly is coachability. Like if you come in and you're new to a role, are you able to take the coaching, like absorb the coaching that you're being given, but then not only that, are you able to apply it pretty much immediately? If you can do those things and you have some passion, like I think we might have talked about this, but if you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out being like, oh, I think I'm going to try this, I think you're going to find out real quick that this isn't exactly for you, right? And so you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and you have to be okay with what we talked about, like that perspective of like you're good with failure because you're learning that way, right? If people were only telling you how good you were all the time, what are you actually learning? Like how do you know what you need to work on? And so you have
Wow.
to be okay with those things. But yeah, passion, coachability, and curiosity. If you have those things, and curiosity goes into like the self-development stuff, like can I, like, you're not going to pass the midterm if all you do is go to class. You have to go out there and actually take what you're learning and grow
Mm.
it. But you have to do that on your own. And that's the curiosity piece. Like, not only am I going to take what I was just taught, but how can I go deeper? How can I learn this even more?
Wow. Keith, I don't feel as bad now about being up at night sometimes and just flipping on a YouTube video, learning more about my product, going through rehearsals in my I'm kidding. I didn't feel bad about it before, but I feel even more sane, right? Because I have this thing about me, Keith, where I can get obsessed with stuff that I'm involved in at times, like very obsessed sometimes. And and what I found is that it may seem like I'm not really doing much, like if I'm spending 10 minutes here, 30 minutes there, watching a YouTube video, writing down my line when I'm not at work. But what I realized is by the time I get to work, I am a lot more effective
That's right.
with just that type of curiosity. So no, I definitely appreciate that.
Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am motivated.
Yeah, as long as you like what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, but at the end of the day, family's everything, friends and family, all that. Make sure you're putting a bunch of time out for that because that's finite, right? Like that's not always going to be there. So just, that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But as long as that's taken care of and you love what you do, go get that information, man. Like just like the more passion, the better.
Yeah, yeah.
Just don't
No,
lose sight of like the other stuff, like the personal stuff.
nah, that's really and Keith, so that's an interesting thing that you just brought up. So one of the most impressionable things for the tech industry that I've experienced is the culture.
Mhm.
It's incredible. I
Yeah,
mean, the attention to a person's home life stability, right? Just like not giving a huge fuss if you have to be off, just allowing a person to take care of their personal affairs
that's right.
as long as they're taking care of what they need to at work.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the pandemic was a total disaster. I think we can all agree on that. But like some good things came out of that. Like companies are now realizing that you can do a lot remote. Like maybe you don't have to like tie someone to an office all the time. Like um, we're all adults, and I think people are starting to finally realize that. And so
Hmm.
treat people like adults and they'll act like adults. And if you scratch their back, your employees will scratch yours. So if you treat your employees well, the sky's the limit. If you don't, it's only a matter of time before you close your doors. That's it.
No, that's good, Keith.
Yeah.
What does the future look like for you career wise? Like where do you see yourself going from here?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes through my head, but I mean, I think really at the end of the day, I love to build, I love to coach and teach and do all those things. So if that means I'm a wildly successful CRO building out my own go-to-market team for some startup, that's great. But if it means me running my own shop and doing one-on-one coaching, helping people eliminate those barriers that we talked about in the pre-interview, like let's do that too. Like as long as I'm teaching and coaching, and like I told you, that's why I get out of bed every day, is to be able to do that. And so that can look a lot of different ways, right? And so we'll just have to see how that goes. Like, you know, I'm open to letting the path lead me to wherever that is. So
I got it. I got it. I like that. Keith, anything that maybe I didn't ask that is on your heart or on your mind to express or share with the viewers?
yeah, I mean, I think in the pre stuff we talked about like what it would take to be efficient in sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself falling into this quite a bit, but like you got to be able to protect your time. Like if like especially as an SDR, or especially SDRs, like so many people want access to SDRs, right? Like marketing will be like, hey, we have this campaign, we need your help doing this. Your AEs are going to say something, the sales leaders are going to say something, your leader is going to say something, your peers, and then all of a sudden you're like, holy smokes, like my calendar is full, I don't even know of what. And time is your most valuable commodity, so protect it. The only thing that you need to be prioritizing is talking to your prospects. So don't overthink stuff. Protect your time. Learn to say no. If someone wants your time in the middle of a call block or during time where you need that flow, decline it and do it respectfully. But that's on you. Protect your time. That's a really important thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that. Like if you can learn to be good at managing your time, the sky really is the limit, because now you can actually go out there and do your job.
No, that's yes. Thank you for saying that. No, that's really good. So I want you to elaborate a little more on in terms of getting better at your job while you're in those time blocks of making calls and prospecting, right? How would you say, practically speaking, is the most efficient way for a person to become better at their craft? Like whether it's the research aspect, what to say when you're actually on the phone, how to wrap the conversation up. Like, do you think it's like role playing, rehearsing in the mirror? Like, what would you say is the best way
Yeah,
to
I
get
was
better?
going to say that exactly. Like practice. Like a wise person once told me back in the day, don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you can't get it wrong. And so
Wow.
it's really important. And a lot of people do this because they think it's like that's a very valuable thing, to be able to practice and be ready for the calls, right? And so a lot of people are like, well, I don't have time to do that. But when you think about that, what the person's really saying is like, I have time to practice on a live prospect or potential customer. Like that's a really expensive practice session. Like you might not want that to be your practice round. Like you should probably be prepared for that.
Wow. Gosh, that is good.
Right? Like no sports team or no actor, you've never watched a movie or any type of game where it's not scripted. They know exactly what they're trying to do, right? And so like there's a reason why these NFL teams practice all week, and sometimes they lose and that sucks. But then what do? They get back on Monday and do it all over again.
Wow.
They learn from what happened on the call. They watch game film, listening to your calls, figure out how you're going to do it differently next time, and then try it again next week. And
Wow.
that's what you have to do. You constantly have to be like watching game film, learning from it, and not making that mistake again. And if you just do that day in and day out, that compounds. And then over time, you're like, wow, you know what? I'm actually kind of a boss on the phone.
Wow. No,
You know?
that's good. That's good. In terms of, so now I'm curious, pay wise, okay? Now I know what, I mean, I know you can like go Google it and stuff like that. And people talk about this pay and that pay, but just in terms of like what being in tech sales affords, which side, I guess, are there two sides? Meaning, is AE a different route than manager? Like they're different, right? I've learned this even more recently, that going from SDR to AE is not the same vertical as going into management.
I mean, they're two different tracks.
Okay.
But are you asking just about like comp wise or?
Yeah, like comp. Like what typically can a person expect pay wise, let's say in their third, fourth, fifth year being in tech sales? And I guess the difference from going the management route as opposed to going the AE route.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, it was honestly where I was in my life, right? Like I told you, I just had a brand new baby at the time. Like I was still raising my oldest daughter. Well, I'm always raising her, but for me at the time when I had to choose, do I want to go be an AE again, or do I want to get into management? The cool thing about the management side of it is that you have a little bit more flexibility, because when you're an individual contributor, like your number is your number. And if you're not selling, that number is not going to get hit. Whereas in management or being a director or something like that, you're running a team. And so your team is responsible for your number. And so you can sort of, you have a little more flexibility. Like when you go on vacation, you might actually be able to take vacation, right? Like, but both like what, uh, both paths are fruitful, like from a comp standpoint. Like as an AE, you can literally make as much money as you want. Like I know plenty of people that have made ridiculous amounts of money. But it's a lot of stress too. But both sides are stressed. So there's good and bad about both, but there's money to be had on both sides. Let's just say that.
Yeah. No, that's good. Keith, anything else? Because
No,
you done brought a lot of heat on this one, Keith.
yeah, I mean, no, it's getting dark, so might go get some dinner or whatever. But man, it's been a pleasure to be on. I'll tell you what, it's been cool.
Gosh, well, Keith, we greatly appreciate you. All of our viewers, community, obviously LinkedIn in the description. Once again, drop some comments. Let us know how this interview has impacted you, and we will see you on the next video.